Yesterday on the program, we told you about the leading contender to become the new head of the Fed, and that's Larry Summers. Now, Larry Summers, the guy who helped deregulate the banks in the first place, as late as 2011 said that deregulation of complicated financial instruments was not the cause of the crash, and it's not something that you should be worried about. That's obviously ridiculous, and he's apparently learned none of the lessons, but the reality is he's gotten paid millions of dollars by those same banks and speaking fees and consultant fees, etc. And by the way, it's not talked about enough. Larry Summers, when he was running Harvard after leaving the Clinton Treasury Department and deregulating the banks, and before going to the Obama Treasury Department and in being the top economic advisor to President Obama and making sure the banks were not re-regulated. In the meanwhile, he was at Harvard, and as he was handling their financial affairs, their endowment fund lost several $billion because of complex financial instruments like derivatives. Well played, Larry. But it turns out, lucky for us, there's a second candidate, Janet Yellen. Now, she has a great history of experience. She's a Fed vice chair right now, and she was the president of the San Francisco Federal Reserve, so a host of experience, and she also has the advantage of having been right throughout. In fact, another person who is a well-known fighter for regulating the banks, making sure that they don't go out of control, is Sheila Bair. She was with the government, and she was one of the few people who warned ahead of the crash, saying, watch out, these guys are doing the wrong things. Her advice was ignored by people like Larry Summers. So here's what Sheila Bair says. Unlike Larry Summers, Tim Geithner, and other Bob Rubin minions frequently mentioned the financial press as potential Bernanke successors, she was not part of the deregulatory cabal that got us into the 2008 financial crisis. So she wasn't part of that mess. She goes on to say, in fact, she had a solid record as a bank regulator at the San Francisco Fed, as one of the few in the Fed system to sound the alarm on the risk of subprime mortgages in 2007. Actually, when you look at Janet Yellen's record, it's stellar. Before the crash, she warned of a housing bubble. All the way back in 2005, she was 100% right about that. In December of 2007, she said, be careful about the shadow banking sector. They were doing a lot of these trades and collateralized debt obligations and the derivative transactions off the records. They had created a shadow banking sector. That's what did Lehman in, and so many other banks, 100% right before the crash. And finally, in 2007, she said credit default swaps were, quote, a major threat. Once again, exactly at the time that people like Larry Summers were saying, oh, it's fine, there's not going to be any problems. I'm so glad we deregulated those banks so that they could take those risks. Yellen was literally yelling, don't do it, watch out, iceberg straight ahead. Now, if you're President Obama, put aside whether you're a progressive or not. I mean, just on the idea of who was right and who was wrong, wouldn't you obviously put Janet Yellen in instead of Larry Summers? Well, if he doesn't, it's obvious who President Obama works for. He doesn't work for the American people, because the choice would be clear if you cared about the consumers and the 8 million jobs we lost in that crash and the great recession that was created. On the other hand, if you work for the banks, Larry Summers would definitely be your guy. Finally, the Huffington Post has a great line. The problem for Yellen is that Washington places little value in being right over the course of a career. In fact, it might do you harm. Well, soon we're going to find out, because soon President Obama is likely to pick one of those two. Which way will he go?